I'm Michaela. I'm down today from Oxford. I was asked to speak, and I'm very, very grateful for the chance to speak because of the fossil fuel divestment campaign that a group of students in Oxford is currently trying to kind of champion. We have had some recent success. The university has called a university-wide consultation on the topic of fossil fuel divestment. So hopefully we'll gain some momentum. Before I get to that though, I'll say a little bit about what divestment is, why it's important. Some people here might already be familiar with it, so I won't spend too much time. Then I'll get on to kind of the dynamics of the campaign, some of the problems we've encountered, and sort of what we hope to do. So first, why divestment? There's a statement that I heard from a financial activist here in London, Brett Scott, which I really like, which basically, to paraphrase, says, investments are about how you imagine the future, what vision of the future you have. And so you need to make sure that however you're investing is consistent with a future that you believe in and that you think is consistent, in this case, with a livable planet. The need for fossil fuel divestment comes from the incredible urgency of responding to climate change. In Copenhagen, governments agreed that we need to stick to 2 degrees warming. We cannot exceed 2 degrees warming because it is an incredibly dangerous tipping point. To do that, though, we need to stay within what climate scientists are calling the carbon budget, which is the total amount of carbon emissions we can afford to spew into the atmosphere before we reach these 2 degrees, before we begin to see even more catastrophic consequences than we're already beginning to witness. To stay within that carbon budget, though, we can only use up 20% of known fossil fuel reserves. So that's 1/5 of the fossil fuel reserves we currently have under the control of fossil fuel companies. Fossil fuel companies, however, not only plan to burn and extract 100% of those reserves, but they're developing and searching for more. So this is a completely unsustainable premise for any business to be operating under. It's moreover one that is supported by governments internationally. There are not the regulations for carbon emissions that there need to be. There is not the investment in alternatives that would mean that we have something viable to switch to. Right now we're all sort of trapped in this carbon dependence, which we need to somehow collectively extricate ourselves from. So divestment, which started as a movement in the States a few years back, championed notably by an environmentalist, Bill McKibben. Many people here might know about him. It's spread because it's this powerful idea that how universities, how faith groups, how cities and pension funds invest their money can be a symbol of what sort of future we need. And it can send a powerful political message to our governments, as well as financial markets, that we need a decisive shift. So, in terms of Oxford, we really started around this time last year. It started out of frustration, this was before I got there, but out of frustration with the fact that the university had recently agreed to a new contract with Shell, which has created a partnership to fund research within the university focused on how to not only extract fossil fuels, but extract unconventional. So this is Arctic drilling, this is fracking, this is, pushing the limits of what we are currently able to access now out of some kind of profit-seeking desperation. But the university is now inextricably committed to this process through its own research. So this was something students couldn't accept. In October, we started focusing on divestment as a way to kind of look at the big picture, force the university to consider its sort of positioning within the fight against climate change and within this huge problem we're facing, which Alan and Natalie both highlighted, in terms of changing our way of doing things, changing our economies, etc. So how we've done it. I mean, in October we had a lot to learn. We didn't know half of what was lying behind divestment. We had to learn about the climate science. We had to learn about really arcane university administrative structures. But most interestingly, we had to figure out how we were going to talk to other students. And the strategy we picked for Oxford was to talk to common rooms. Oxford is this really bizarre, decentralized system with, I think it's 38 colleges. And students are kind of fragmented across these colleges. So to get everyone to kind of hear each other and know about what was going on, you had to, at the end of the day, go to these colleges, go to these common rooms, and present this motion and get it passed, and get the mandate and the voice to tell the university that this is something people really care about. So we've done that. We are now up to 25 common rooms, which is getting close. I mean, we're about a little over a third of the way there, so it's slow going. But the conversations we've had in these common rooms have been fantastic. Sometimes it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster because you get students who are very opposed to the idea. Often, disturbingly, students who say, I have a BP scholarship, so what are you telling me about my scholarship? So, well, this is part of how we're all kind of implicated and how there's the sense in which we have to pull ourselves out. But more than that, we've had conversations with people where you say the thing about how you can only extract a fifth of known fossil fuel reserves, and people kind of go, oh right, okay, this is a problem, and there's a sense of surprise, but one that then is kind of channeled into more energy. So, kind of on the back of these common rooms, we've got the university-wide consultation, and we've started organizing more. And importantly, we've started organizing with the Oxfordshire Fossil Free Campaign. And it's an unbelievable group of people across Oxford, activists, lifetime activists, who have phenomenal networks and who have been a wonderful motivating force. And what that kind of led to is last week we had ended up being a really fun demonstration going through Oxford, and kind of felt like for us something that we needed to keep up. This was promising, this was building momentum, we even gotten a couple papers, that was exciting. And it's something that can happen in Oxford and in other places around the UK. That said, we have encountered a lot of problems. The university is pretty intransigent. We don't know what will come out of the consultation. We'd like to be optimistic, but at the end of the day, they keep saying, how will this affect our returns? How can we even divest? And that has made me look at, what is the bigger problem? And when you look at the London Stock Exchange, there is a huge problem. 30% of the listed companies on the stock exchange are implicated in fossil fuels. Getting out of those is really difficult. There are so-called fossil-free funds that are out of fossil fuel companies, but then they use Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley is one of the biggest financiers of fossil fuel companies. So we're facing a really fundamental structural problem. And, universities, if they divest, if they use their voice, their kind of institutional leadership to kind of shift the discourse, that's positive. But we need to then think about how our universities and how we as campaigns in really concrete ways can target these structural embedded problems in our financial system. How we can, get people to acknowledge that the way risk is calculated, there are these awful games that don't take into account climate change at all. Carbon costs are just not factored in. And what this means is we need policy, we need regulation, we need more imagination. And I think that's where divestment is such a powerful concept, because it says what the bottom line is. I've had to talk to really unusual people I didn't think I'd be talking to as part of this consultation, like fund managers from London, and they say, we invest in efficient fossil fuel companies. They burn less while extracting all of this stuff. And you're just like, this isn't this doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. You haven't done the math. You're deluding yourself. But this passes for progressive investment. So, you know, this is what we've got to change, and this is why divestment is something that we can believe in. We can honestly say this is what we're pushing towards. This is where we have to be able to arrive. And anything short of this vision is just pretending. It's being PC, it's saying climate change is a problem, but it's not admitting what actually has to be done. So I think, you know, there's a lot of energy in the divestment campaign across the UK, internationally. There are other universities in the UK which are really leading the way. Edinburgh seems like it might actually divest. They've had a phenomenal student activism. SOAS is amazing. I hope some of you are here. I would love to chat. And then other, you know, elsewhere in the US and kind of Australia, all over the place. But it's this kind of momentum that we need to build on ahead of Paris, ahead of a whole set of policy decisions that have to be made by governments across the world. So we need to think about how we can link these campaigns, how we can keep the momentum up, and how we can force people to force government leaders to be more imaginative and understanding in exactly what needs to be done. So thank you.
Thank you to our three speakers. Now I'm going to be asking. I want to be slightly hypocritical on my part because mine is being kept on for sharing purposes. But I want people to turn off their mobile phones or keep them on silent. As we've got to say at the start of